All right, today we're going to dive into something that is quite literally the foundation of modern medicine. It's called evidence-based medicine. Now, this is the system that's supposed to make sure every single treatment you get is safe and effective. But what if that same system, in its relentless search for perfect proof, sometimes misses the whole point? Seriously, think about this for a second. It sounds completely ridiculous, right? I mean, of course a parachute works. But this one simple, kind of absurd question, it perfectly captures this huge ongoing debate right at the heart of medical science. Stick with me and you're going to see exactly why. Okay, so before we start poking holes in the system, we really need to get why it's considered the gold standard in the first place. Why did we even need something called evidence-based medicine, or EBM, to begin with? So this definition from back in 1996 was a total game changer. The whole idea was to transform medicine from something that was based on tradition or anecdote, whatever some senior doctor thought worked, into a real rigorous scientific discipline. The goal was pretty simple. Let's use hard data to make the absolute best decisions for patients. But here is where things start to get, well, a little tricky. See, EBM isn't just about using evidence. It's about ranking it. The system actually created a pyramid, a whole hierarchy, to judge the quality of different kinds of data. Right at the very top, the absolute peak of this pyramid, you've got what are called randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trials. This is the gold standard. You have one group that gets the real treatment, another gets a sugar pill, and nobody, not the patients, not even the doctors, knows who got what until the very end. It's all about eliminating bias, and that's super important because sometimes simpler observational studies can be really misleading. A treatment might look like it's working, but really some other factor is doing the heavy lifting. And that's why all those other studies, they get ranked way, way down at the bottom. And this is where the hammer drops. According to the super influential Cochrane Group, any evidence from those observational studies is officially labeled low quality. It can only hint that something works. So what that really means is if you can't prove a treatment with one of those top-tier trials, it's just not supported by high-quality evidence. End of story. It doesn't matter how obvious the results might seem to you or me. Which brings us right back to our parachute. This is exactly what happens when a super strict interpretation of that evidence pyramid slams right into the real world. You get these treatments that are obviously, undeniably effective, but you can't logically or ethically test them with a placebo. I mean, think about it. How on earth would you run a placebo-controlled trial for dialysis? You'd have a control group of people with kidney failure just getting a fake treatment? Of course not. That's completely unethical. And it's the same for breathing ventilators, prosthetic limbs, and dozens of other basic life-saving things in medicine. Under a really rigid system, the evidence for all of them would be considered low quality. And look, this is not just some quirky thought experiment. This exact debate is happening right now in real hospitals affecting real patients. Let's take a look at a modern example from pulmonary medicine.
Okay, get a load of this paradox. On one side, you have a study that meets that high-quality standard, but it only shows a patient's life is extended by a few months. On the other side, you have an observational study, low-quality evidence, that shows a ventilator can extend a patient's life by up to 60 years. And yet, reviewers have actually argued that the evidence for a few months of life is superior to the evidence for 60 years of life, just because of the type of study it was. That is a staggering dilemma.
And this isn't some new problem created by modern red tape. History actually gives us a really tragic, really powerful lesson about what happens when we ignore compelling evidence just because it doesn't quite fit the accepted scientific ideas of the time. Way back in the 1700s, a guy named Dr. James Lind ran what was basically one of the very first clinical trials. He proved, without a doubt, that citrus fruit cured scurvy, this horrible disease that was killing sailors. He published his findings. And then for 40 years, nothing happened. The medical establishment just ignored it because they couldn't explain how it worked. It just didn't fit their model. The human cost of that delay, it was just immense. It's estimated that over 100,000 sailors died from a disease that was completely preventable and curable after the cure had already been proven. All because the evidence, as clear as day, was rejected by dogma. That's the danger of being too rigid. So, where does all this leave us? Is evidence-based medicine itself the problem, or is the problem how we've started to interpret it? Let's go back to the source. Well, here's the twist. That strict hierarchical pyramid, that's just one interpretation. The original idea was actually much more flexible, more holistic. It wasn't only about randomized trials, it was about combining the best available evidence with the practical wisdom and expertise of the doctor.
The key phrase, the magic words in the original definition, is current best evidence, not only placebo-controlled evidence. So for a parachute, the best available evidence is pretty simple. People who use one survive, and people who don't. That observational evidence is the best we're ever going to get, and under the original definition, that's what we're supposed to use.
So the big takeaway here isn't to just throw out evidence-based medicine. Not at all. It's an absolutely essential tool that has saved countless lives. The point is that any tool, when you apply it like an unthinking, rigid dogma, can become dangerous. The goal should always be to use our judgment, to mix scientific rigor with clinical expertise and, just plain old common sense. And that really leaves us with this final question. When you're looking at a life-altering outcome, a parachute that works, a ventilator that gives someone decades of life, what should our real priority be? The quality of our evidence or the quality of the outcome? The purity of the scientific method or the life-saving result that's staring us right in the face? It's something for all of us to think about. Thanks for joining me.